Owen returned home after 8 years, carrying the burden of war. But what welcomed him was not a warm embrace. His mother, Maria, only looked at him with distant, weary eyes. And then his brother Rick appeared. He offered no handshake, only a cruel sneer mocking his past service. But Owen had not returned alone. His shepherd, Max, immediately sensed the hostility. As Rick stepped forward, trying to dominate him, Max did not bark. He simply moved, silently placing his body between Owen and Rick as a low, deep rumble began in his chest. Owen was home, but he was clearly not welcome. Why was his own family treating him like an enemy? Please support us by subscribing to our channel. The diesel smoke of the departing bus dissolved into the oppressive Nevada heat. Owen stood motionless on the cracked pavement, a single duffel bag at his feet. The heat was not just a temperature. It was a physical weight pressing down on his shoulders, shimmering in waves that distorted the empty main street of his hometown. He had been gone for 8 years. The town looked smaller, sadder, the paint on the storefronts peeling back like sunburnt skin. A low whine pulled his attention downward. At his side sat Max, a large German shepherd whose presence was the only thing that felt real. Max was 3 years old, his thick coat an unusual and striking mix of gray and white, making him look more like a wolf of the high desert than a typical shepherd. His ears were alert, his brown eyes sharp, and his entire being was focused on Owen. He was a creature of profound loyalty, quiet and observant, a mirror of the vigilance Owen could not turn off. Owen adjusted his grip on the duffel bag. He was a tall man, built with a wiry strength that spoke of endurance rather than both. His brown hair was cut short, practical. His face was weather-beaten, etched with lines that made him look older than his 30 years. But his eyes, though haunted, held a deep-seated kindness. He wore what felt like a uniform, a gray t-shirt under an unbuttoned plaid shirt of navy, gray, and pale beige, faded blue jeans, and sturdy work boots. "Well, boy," Owen said, his voice rough from disuse, "I guess this is it." Max nudged his hand, a silent signal of support. They began the walk. The house was just as he remembered, only more neglected. The paint was chipping, the yard was a collection of dry weeds, and the front porch sagged. As they approached, the screen door creaked open. A thin woman in a faded house dress stepped out, wiping her hands on an apron. This was Maria, his mother. Her hair was brittle and graying, her skin like dried paper. She looked at him, her eyes tired and distant. "Owen, you're here," she said. It was not a greeting, just a statement of fact. "Hey, Mom." She barely glanced at Max, her gaze sliding past the dog as if he were invisible. "Rick's inside. He'll show you to your old room. I've got dinner on." She turned and went back into the house, letting the screen door slam shut behind her. Owen closed his eyes for a brief second. He had not expected a welcome party, but the sheer apathy felt like a physical blow. Max whined again, softly, pushing his head against Owen's thigh. "It's okay, Max," Owen murmured, scrubbing the dog's head. "Come on." The air inside the house was stale, thick with the smell of old grease and dust. The television was blaring from the living room. As Owen stepped into the dim hallway, a figure emerged from the armchair. This was Rick, his older brother. Where Owen was thin and sharp, Rick was larger, softer in the middle, with a face that had settled into a permanent expression of lazy arrogance. He held a can of beer in his hand. "Well, well," Rick sneered, his eyes raking over Owen. "Look what the wind blew in." Finally done playing soldier? Owen just stood there, his hand gripping the strap of his bag. Hello, Rick. Mom said you were bringing a dog. Rick's eyes dropped to Max. Looks like a wolf. You sure he's safe? He's fine, Owen said flatly. Rick took a step closer, his demeanor turning aggressive. He was testing him, just like he always had. We got rules here, Owen. No animals on the furniture, and he better not make a mess. I don't need a... Rick gestured dismissively, stepping into Owen's personal space. Owen's shoulders tensed, his body bracing for an impact that was not coming, his breath hitching. Before he could flinch or speak, Max moved. It was not a violent motion. It was a silent, fluid shift of weight. Max simply stepped forward, positioning his solid body directly between the two men. He did not look at Rick. He looked straight ahead, a statue of gray and white fur. But a low rumble started deep in his chest, a sound like distant thunder. It was not a growl of attack, but a non-negotiable warning. Rick stopped. He looked down at the dog, his sneer faltering for just a second. He was not afraid, but he was annoyed. Tough guy, huh? Rick scoffed, taking half a step back. Whatever. Your old room is the same as you left it. Just try to stay out of the way. Rick turned and disappeared back into the living room, the volume on the television seeming to increase. Owen let out a breath he did not know he was holding. He reached down and laid a trembling hand on Max's head. The dog's fur was warm, solid. Max leaned into the touch, the rumbling in his chest stopping instantly. Good boy, Owen whispered. He walked down the short hall to his childhood bedroom. Rick was right. It was exactly as he had left it. The same faded posters, the same narrow bed, the same small desk. The air in here was even more still, thick with dust motes dancing in the single shaft of light from the dirty window. Owen dropped his duffel bag. It landed on the floor with a soft thud. He sat on the edge of the bed, the old springs groaning in protest. He was home. He was supposed to be safe, but every nerve ending felt exposed, raw. The air was too thick, the silence too loud. And then it happened. Outside down the street, a truck backfired. It was a sharp, percussive sound, two cracks in quick succession, crack, crack. Owen's world vanished. He was not in his room. He was somewhere else, somewhere hot and dusty. The smell of diesel from the bus, the stale air in the house, the grit on the windowsill, it all converged. His lungs locked. He could not breathe. The walls of the small room felt like they were shrinking, the ceiling pressing down. He could hear shouting, a high-pitched whine in his ears. His heart hammered against his ribs, a desperate bird in a cage. He was falling, drowning in the dry, arid air. His hands flew up to his ears, his fingers digging into his scalp. A wet nose pressed hard into his clenched fist. It was a sudden, jarring sensation of cold and damp in a world that had become nothing but heat and noise. Maximum. The dog had been watching him, and the instant Owen's breathing changed, he had acted. He was not frantic. He was focused. He pushed his nose into Owen's hand again, harder this time, breaking the contact between Owen's fingers and his head. When Owen did not respond, Max moved again. He pressed his entire body against Owen's legs, a solid, breathing wall of warmth and loyalty. He pushed his heavy head into Owen's lap, insistent, demanding attention. Owen gasped, a ragged intake of air. His vision cleared. The shouting in his ears faded, replaced by the sound of Max's heavy panting. He looked down. The gray and white dog was staring up at him, his intelligent eyes filled with a concern that was almost human. Owen's trembling hands dropped from his head, and buried themselves in the thick fur of Max's neck. He squeezed, anchoring himself. "I'm here," he whispered, as much to the dog as to himself. "I'm okay, boy." He focused on the coarse strands of fur between his fingers. He focused on the steady rhythm of the dog's breathing. He focused on the solid weight against his legs. In, out. In, out. Slowly the hammering in his chest subsided. The walls of the room returned to their normal size. He was in his room. He was in Nevada. He was not there. He sat like that for a long time, his hands gripping his only ally, his anchor in the storm. The war had followed him home. The silence of the house was more threatening than any explosion, and the only friendly soul in this arid land was the one breathing steadily against his knees. The silence in the house lasted exactly 12 hours. The next morning, as Owen finished a small bowl of cereal at the kitchen table, Rick walked in, already dressed for work in a stained t-shirt and heavy boots. "So," Rick said, grabbing the milk carton and drinking directly from it, "you going to sit around letting that mutt of yours eat my food, or are you going to make yourself useful?" Owen looked up, his face impassive. "I need a job." "Yeah, you do." Rick wiped his mouth on his sleeve. "I'm running a framing crew over at the new clinic build. It's temporary, just putting up the interior walls. You know how to swing a hammer, right? Or did they just teach you how to salute?" "I can work," Owen said, keeping his voice level. "Good. Be at the site on the east end of town in 30 minutes, and I'm not paying you to babysit." He glanced at Max, who was lying by the back door, watching Rick with unblinking intensity. "He stays in my truck," Owen said. "He won't be a problem." Whatever. Just be there." Rick grabbed his keys and left, the screen door slamming shut. Maria, who had been at the sink the entire time, said nothing. The construction site was a skeleton of steel beams and concrete flooring, baking under the relentless morning sun. The air was already thick with dust and the high-pitched whine of power saws. Owen parked his old pickup truck in a sliver of shade cast by a water tower. He left all 4 windows down an inch and filled Max's heavy bowl with water. "Stay, boy," he commanded. "I'll check on you." Max laid his head on his paws, his gray and white body already panting slightly, his eyes never leaving Owen as he walked toward the site trailer. Rick was inside, leaning back in a squeaky office chair, feet up on a desk cluttered with blueprints and fast food wrappers. The trailer's one air conditioning unit was rattling loudly, fighting a losing battle against the heat. "You're late," Rick said. "It's been 20 minutes, Owen replied, checking his watch. Rick just grunted and tossed a single folded sheet of blueprint paper onto the desk. "This is our section, the interior partitions for the east wing. I got the other guys starting on the south end. You take this. It's all marked." Owen picked up the paper and unfolded it. It was a clean, fresh print. "Listen," Rick said, suddenly leaning forward, his voice taking on a tone of false seriousness. "This is the load-bearing stuff. The measurements have to be exact. I mean exact. You hear me? The inspectors are all over this job. Don't mess it up." "I understand," Owen said, folding the paper and sliding it into his back pocket. "See that you do." Rick waved him away. "Tools are in the lockbox. Get to it." For the next 4 hours, Owen worked. He was grateful for the labor. The physical rhythm of it, measure, cut, lift, secure, was a kind of meditation. It was a problem he could solve. He was meticulous, his military discipline taking over. He measured every piece of lumber twice before the saw ever touched it. The noise of the nail guns was sharp, percussive, and for the first hour it made his shoulders hunch. But he breathed through it, focusing on the task, on the solid feel of the hammer in his hand. Max watched him from the truck. Every time Owen paused to wipe the sweat from his eyes or take a drink of water, he would look over, and Max would be there, a steady, silent presence. By noon, he had framed out the main corridor. It was solid, square, and by his measurements, perfect. He was gathering the cut-off pieces when Rick's voice boomed across the site. "Owen, get over here, now!" Owen's head snapped up. Rick was standing by the new wall, a tape measure in his hand, his face red with theatrical anger. The other two workers, men Owen had not even spoken to, had stopped their own work to watch. "What is this?" Rick yelled as Owen approached. "What did I tell you? It's the main corridor," Owen said, his stomach tightening. "It's wrong." Rick snapped the tape measure shut. "This whole wall is off by 6 inches. 6 inches! Are you blind? Or just stupid?" Owen felt a cold flush of confusion. "What? That's impossible. I measured every cut. It's 12 feet on center, just like the print said." "Oh, really?" Rick sneered. He yanked the folded paper from Owen's back pocket, the one he had been working from. "Does this say 12 feet?" He unfolded the paper and shoved it in Owen's face. Owen stared at it. His eyes traced the numbers. The call-out for the main partition clearly read 11 feet 6 inches. Owen's blood ran cold. He looked from the paper to the wall. He did not understand. He knew he had read 12. He knew he had set his guides to 12. He looked back at the paper, 11:6. Did I misread it?" he whispered, his confidence shattering. The noise of the sight, the heat, the burning stare of his brother, it all swam together. He felt a flicker of that same disorientation from the day before, the feeling of the world tilting. "You misread it?" Rick laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You misread it. You just cost us an entire day of work and hundreds of dollars in lumber. This whole thing has to come down. I told you it was important. I knew I couldn't trust you." He turned to the other workers. "See what I have to deal with? My own brother. Useless." The humiliation was absolute. It burned hotter than the sun. Owen could not speak. He just stared at the wall he had built, a monument to his own failure. "Fix it," Rick snarled. "Tear it all down, and you're not getting paid for the time it takes." Rick stormed back to the air-conditioned trailer, slamming the door. Owen stood frozen for a full minute, his hands clenched into fists. He was shaking, not with rage, but with a terrifying, destabilizing confusion. Was his mind really this broken? Was he this unreliable? He walked on unsteady legs back to his truck. Max was standing, his body pressed against the open window, whining in distress. The dog could feel the vibrating wave of panic coming off Owen. I don't know, boy," Owen mumbled. He opened the tailgate and sat down, burying his face in his hands. He had to get his head straight before he could tear down the wall. He fumbled for his water bottle. He needed the blueprint. He had to look at it again, in the quiet, to understand how he could have made such a basic, fundamental mistake. He must have left it back in the trailer when Rick grabbed it. "Stay," he said to Max, his voice strained. He walked to the trailer and pulled the door open. The inside was empty. Rick must have gone to yell at someone else. The small room was blessedly cool and quiet, save for the rattle of the AC unit. He saw the blueprint sheet on the floor by the desk, where Rick had thrown it. He picked it up. 11 feet, 6 inches. He leaned against the wall, his head spinning. It did not make sense. A moment later, the trailer door nudged open. Max, disobeying the stay command, stepped inside. He had clearly sensed that Owen was not okay. He walked straight to Owen and pushed his cold, wet nose insistently into his owner's hand. "Not now, Max. I have to think." But Max was agitated. He whined, his nose twitching. He could smell Owen's fear, but he could also smell something else. Rick's scent was heavy in the small room. It was on the desk, on the chair, and it was strong in the corner, by the overflowing trash can. The corner was a mess. It was a pile of discarded coffee cups, greasy fast food bags, and several other wads of crumpled paper. Max walked over to the pile, sniffing intently. "Max, leave it," Owen said, his voice flat and tired. "Come on, don't make a mess." Max ignored him. His nose zeroed in on one particular object. A tightly crumpled ball of blueprint paper wedged beneath a stack of old invoices. It smelled strongly of Rick, and also of the cheap, greasy cheeseburger Rick had eaten for breakfast. The dog nudged the paper with his nose. When it did not move, he deftly grabbed a corner of it in his teeth and pulled it free from the pile. He trotted back to Owen and dropped the damp, wrinkled ball at his feet. "What is this?" Owen sighed. "More trash?" He was annoyed, but he bent down and picked it up. It was heavy, the same high-quality paper. He began to smooth it out. It was stained with a large coffee ring and a greasy thumbprint. He flattened the paper against the wall. It was the same section, the east wing. But as his eyes found the main corridor, his heart stopped. The measurement, printed in clear, bold text, read 12 feet on center. He looked from the greasy, correct paper in his hand to the clean, falsified one on the desk. It was not a mistake. The sheet Rick had given him was a fabrication, a new print, deliberately altered. Rick had given him the wrong numbers, waited for him to do the work, and then pulled the wrong sheet from his pocket to prove Owen's incompetence in front of the crew. The confusion evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. This was not a mistake. It was an ambush. Owen's hand clenched, crumpling the true blueprint again. He felt Max press his solid body against his leg, a silent, grounding presence. He was not crazy. He was not incompetent. He was being hunted. Owen did not tear down the wall. He packed his tools, walked back to the trailer, and placed the 2 blueprints on Rick's desk, the crumpled, correct one on top of the falsified, clean one. He did not say a word. He just looked at his brother, then turned, motioned for Max to hop into the truck, and drove home. The silence in the cab heavier than the oppressive heat. That evening, the house was a powder keg. Maria served a silent, joyless dinner. Owen ate quickly, pushing food around his plate. Rick drank 3 beers, his eyes fixed on the local news, his jaw tight. When Maria finally went to her room, Rick broke the silence. "So," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "you think you're smart. You think you found something." "I know what you did," Owen said, his voice equally quiet. Max, sensing the shift, rose from his spot by the door and sat at Owen's feet. Rick laughed, a short, sharp bark that held no humor. "You don't know anything. That was a test. A simple test of competence. And you failed. You spent more time whining to your wolf than reading a print." "It was sabotage," Owen stated. Rick slammed his beer can on the table. Sabotage! You think I have time for games? He stood up and began to pace the small kitchen, his agitation palpable. He looked cornered, his usual arrogance replaced by a raw, vibrating panic. I'm in real trouble, Owen. You get that? I owe people, real people, not the bank, people who don't care about excuses. And that clinic job? It's peanuts. It's not enough. Owen just watched him. He had seen this kind of panic before, in men who had lost too much, who were about to make catastrophic mistakes. Rick stopped pacing and looked at him, his eyes suddenly calculating. I've got a real payday tonight, Owen. A big one. Enough to clear my slate. And you're going to help me. No, Owen said simply. I'm not. You are, Rick insisted, stepping closer. Max rumbled a low warning, but Rick ignored him. You live in my house. You eat my food. You're part of this family. And you're going to pull your weight. You owe me. I don't owe you anything. Especially not after today. I don't care about today. Rick was almost pleading now. Look, it's easy. It's not even illegal. Not really. A rancher up in the high country. His herd got scattered. He's paying cash, good cash, just for us to drive out, find them, and push them back toward his land. It's just a long drive. We need 2 sets of eyes, that's all. Your truck and mine. Owen studied his brother's face. Every instinct, every fiber of his being screamed that it was a lie. But he also saw the desperation. A desperate man was a dangerous man. Please, Owen, Rick said, his voice dropping. Help me. Just this one night. We'll be back by dawn. Owen looked down at Max. The dog was staring at Rick, his body rigid. Owen knew he should say no. He should pack his duffel bag, take Max, and walk away. But where would he go? He had $40 in his wallet. He let out a long, slow breath. One night, he said, and we take my truck. No, Rick said too quickly. My truck is better. It's got the gear we need. You just ride with me. Bring the dog. I don't care. Just be ready in an hour. It was past midnight when they left. The town was asleep, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the streetlights. Owen sat in the passenger seat of Rick's battered pickup, the cab smelling of old coffee and anxiety. Max was squeezed onto the floor at his feet, restless, his nails clicking on the metal every time the truck hit a bump. They drove for an hour, then 2. They left the highway, then the paved county road, turning onto a rough dirt track that climbed higher and higher into the remote desert plateau. The air grew cold. Where are we, Rick? Owen finally asked, breaking the tense silence. There are no ranches out here. This is BLM land. Shut up and watch, Rick said. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. We're almost there. Max was panting now, a low, stressed sound. He pushed his head onto Owen's knee, seeking reassurance Owen could not give. Rick finally pulled the truck up to the rim of a deep, dark canyon and cut the engine. The silence that rushed in was absolute, a vast, cold emptiness under a sky overflowing with stars. This is it, Rick whispered. Owen looked around. This is what? I don't see any cattle. Rick smiled, and in the dim glow of the dashboard lights, it was a terrible sight. Cattle? No, little brother. We're hunting. He got out of the truck and walked to the bed. Owen followed him. Rick threw back a tarp, revealing a heavy-duty spotlight, a car battery to power it, and 2 high-powered rifles with scopes. Owen's blood turned to ice. You said we were looking for strays. These are strays, Rick said, his voice thick with a greedy excitement. Mustangs. Wild horses, they're all over this land, eating the grass the cattle are supposed to get. The ranchers are paying a bounty, $500 a head, cash. By morning, all my debts are gone. He grabbed one of the rifles and shoved it hard into Owen's chest. You're a Marine. You know how to use this, don't you? Owen stared at the weapon. This is poaching, Rick. It's a felony. It's population control, Rick hissed. It's survival. Now, are you going to help me or are you going to walk home? Before Owen could answer, Rick slammed the spotlight onto the roof of the cab, connected the wires, and flipped the switch. A brilliant, harsh beam of light cut through the blackness, illuminating the canyon floor 100 yards below. Rick swept the light back and forth. "Where are you?" he muttered. And then he found them. The light froze on a small herd gathered near a cluster of juniper trees. A magnificent stallion, his coat a pale buckskin, raised his head. Several mares and a young spindly-legged colt huddled behind him. They were beautiful, wild, and trapped in the glare. "Yes," Rick breathed. He chambered around and raised his rifle. "Take the stallion first, the big one. The rest will scatter." Owen stood frozen, his own rifle heavy and useless in his hands. He could not do this. Inside the truck, Max was standing, his body rigid. He could feel the sudden, sharp shift in the air. He could smell the adrenaline from Rick, the wave of pure, cold horror from Owen. He could feel the focused, predatory intent. This was not the quiet vigilance of a construction site. This was the prelude to a kill. Rick settled his aim. His breathing stopped. The silence of the canyon was absolute. The explosion of sound from inside the truck cab was so loud, it was painful. Max lunged against the passenger window, barking with a frantic, desperate energy. Down in the canyon, the stallion reared. The herd scattered, a blur of motion, vanishing into the darkness like ghosts. "No!" Rick screamed. He swung the spotlight wildly, but they were gone. "Shut that dog up!" It was the opening Owen needed. His military training took over. He raised his own rifle, not at Rick, but at the sky. He fired a single shot. The sound was deafening, echoing off the rock walls, a final, definitive period on the night's hunt. Silence. The horses were gone. Rick slowly lowered his rifle. He turned, his face a mask of disbelief that was quickly hardening into pure, unadulterated rage. You did that," he whispered. "You. And that mutt. You did that on purpose." Owen did not flinch. "It was wrong, Rick." "Wrong?" Rick's voice cracked. Before Owen could brace himself, Rick's fist flew. The blow caught Owen high on the cheekbone, sending him stumbling back. He tasted the sharp, metallic tang of blood. Max went berserk inside the truck, clawing at the glass, snarling. "You ruined it! You ruined everything!" Rick was sobbing now, a desperate, ugly sound. "That was my money! That was my life." "It was poaching," Owen said, spitting blood onto the dry ground. "I don't care!" Rick threw his rifle into the truck bed. He stalked to the driver's side and ripped the door open. He looked at Owen with wild eyes. "Get the dog out." "What?" "Get him out of my truck, now, or I swear, Owen, I will shoot him right here." Seeing the truth in his brother's threat, Owen moved quickly. He opened the passenger door. "Max, out! Heel!" Max leaped out, landing silently. He immediately placed himself between Owen and the truck, the fur on his neck standing on end, a low, menacing growl aimed at Rick. Rick slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life, shattering the quiet. "You're not leaving us here," Owen said, but the cold realization was already settling in. "We're 40 miles from the highway." Rick looked at him, his face illuminated by the red glow of the dashboard. The panic was gone, replaced by something cold and empty. "You're a soldier. A hero. You'll find your way back," he said, mocking Owen's service. "You always thought you were so much better than me, little brother. Go ahead. Prove it." He slammed the truck into gear. The wheels spun, throwing gravel and dust. Owen and Max stood motionless, watching the red taillights disappear down the winding dirt track. The sound of the engine faded, swallowed by the immense, cold silence of the high desert. Owen looked down at Max. The dog looked up at him, whining softly. He was alone, miles from anywhere, and the night was very, very cold. The sound of the engine faded, replaced by a silence so vast it felt like a physical weight. The rumble of Rick's truck was gone, leaving only the high, thin whisper of the wind moving over the canyon rim. Owen stood motionless, the blood on his cheek already starting to congeal in the freezing air. The high desert, scorching by day, was mercilessly cold at night. The temperature was dropping fast, a clear, sharp cold that bit through his plaid shirt and t-shirt as if they were not there. He looked down. Max was pressed hard against his leg, shivering, his gray and white fur puffed out against the chill. The dog looked up at him, his intelligent eyes wide, reflecting the dense field of stars above. He let out a low, questioning whine. Owen's military training kicked in, a cold, familiar set of protocols that overrode the initial shock. Assess the situation. The situation was catastrophic. They were miles from any known road, with no water, no food, and no shelter. His cheekbone throbbed where Rick had hit him, a dull ache that punctuated his every heartbeat. He had his wallet, a pocket knife, and Max. Survival. "Okay, boy," Owen said, his voice a rough rasp. "We have to move. We can't stay here." Staying still was a death sentence. Hypothermia would claim them before sunrise. He scanned the horizon. The dirt track Rick had taken was their only guide. They could not follow it. Rick might come back, but they could walk parallel to it, heading in the general direction of the distant highway. He hoped it was east. "Come on, Max." "With me." He started walking. The first hour was fueled by a cold, sharp rage. Rick had not just ambushed his career. He had not just stolen his money. He had tried to kill him. He had left him and Max to die of exposure. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, it left no room for any other emotion. Max trotted beside him, his gait economical, his senses on high alert. The dog was a creature of the wilderness, more so than Owen, but he was still a domestic animal, unaccustomed to this level of hostile emptiness. After the second hour, the rage faded, leached away by the cold and the endless, crunching rhythm of his own boots on the gravel. He was tired, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that came from more than just the walk. He was tired of fighting in the desert abroad and fighting in the desert at home. The landscape was alien, a monochrome world of pale sand and the dark skeletal shapes of juniper trees. The moon was a sliver, offering almost no light. By the third hour, the thirst began. His mouth was dry, his tongue thick. The cut on his cheek had stopped bleeding, but the swelling was pulling his eye shut. He stumbled over a loose rock, catching himself on his hands. Max was instantly at his side, nudging his arm, whining. "I'm okay, boy," Owen panted, pushing himself back up. "I'm okay. We keep moving. But he was not okay. The cold was inside him now. He could feel it in his joints. His hands were numb. They walked until the blackness of the sky began to pale into a deep, bruised purple. The false dawn. This was the coldest part of the night. Owen's shivering was uncontrollable. He staggered to a stop, his legs refusing to obey. He was dehydrated, hypothermic, and his will was gone. He looked at Max, whose own breathing was shallow, his paws clearly sore from the sharp rocks. "I'm sorry, Max," Owen whispered. His words were clouds of vapor in the air. "I'm done. I can't. I can't." He sank to his knees. This was it. He had survived IEDs, firefights, and the crushing weight of his own mind, only to be ended by his brother in a patch of empty dirt. He slumped forward, leaning his head against a rough boulder. "Go on, boy," he mumbled, a useless command. "Run. Save yourself." Max whined, a high-pitched, desperate sound. He licked Owen's frozen face, trying to rouse him. He pawed at his shoulder. Owen just shook his head, too tired to even lift his arms. Max stopped, his body suddenly going rigid. He lifted his head, his ears swiveling forward, his black nose twitching. He stood perfectly still for a full 10 seconds, a statue of gray and white fur in the dim light. The wind had shifted, carrying a new scent on its freezing current. It was faint, buried beneath the dominant smells of sagebrush and cold stone. But it was there. It was the unmistakable, earthy, tangy smell of horse manure. And beneath that, something even more vital, the damp, mineral scent of water. Not a river, but a trough, a large, permanent source. Max's exhaustion vanished. He let out a single sharp bark. It was not a warning. It was a call of discovery. He turned to Owen and barked again, nudging his owner's head forcefully. "Leave me be, Max," Owen muttered, his eyes closed. Max would not be ignored. This was not a request for comfort. This was a command. He grabbed the sleeve of Owen's plaid shirt, his teeth gentle but firm, and tugged. Hard. Owen, pulled off balance, fell onto his side. "Max, stop!" The dog pulled again, growling with effort, pulling him in a new direction, northwest, away from the tracks. A tiny spark of Owen's survival instinct flickered. The dog had found something. A dog's senses did not lie. "What is it, boy?" Owen forced himself onto his hands and knees. "What do you have?" Max barked again, a sharp, excited sound, and ran 10 paces in the new direction before turning back, waiting. Owen pushed himself to his feet. His legs felt like cement. "Okay," he panted. "Okay, Max. I'm with you. Lead on." It was the final push. Owen stopped thinking. He just followed the gray and white shadow in front of him. He put one foot in front of the other, his world reduced to the dog and the next step. He did not know if they were walking for 10 minutes or an hour. He walked until his legs finally buckled, his vision swimming. He fell, this time completely. His outstretched hand did not hit dirt. It hit wood. A post. He looked up, his vision blurry. A fence. A strand of barbed wire. It was a fence line, stretching off into the dimness in both directions. We found it, boy," he breathed, his fingers gripping the rough wood as if it were the hand of God. Max licked his face, his tail giving a single, weary wag. And then the dog, his duty done, collapsed beside him, laying his heavy head on Owen's chest. Owen closed his eyes. He had nothing left. He held on to the fence post, tethering himself to the world, and let the darkness take him. He woke to the sound of hoofbeats, slow, steady. He peeled his swollen eyes open. The sun was up, a brilliant, painful orange on the horizon. The world was blurry. A figure on a tall horse was approaching. The figure stopped about 20 feet away, silhouetted against the rising sun.
"That's a rough way to start the day," a voice said.
It was deep, calm, and unhurried. Owen tried to speak, but his throat was sealed. He could only cough. Max, though exhausted, lifted his head and managed a low, protective growl. "Easy, dog," the man said. The figure dismounted. As he walked closer, Owen could finally see him. He was an older man, perhaps in his late 60s, with a face that looked like it had been carved from the same rock as the canyons. His white hair was hidden under a battered cowboy hat, and he wore a heavy canvas work coat. He was tall, like Owen, but with a thicker, sturdier build. He moved with the slow, deliberate confidence of a man who had spent his entire life on this land. This was Sam. Sam stopped a few feet away, his eyes taking in the scene with a quick, practiced glance. He saw Owen's swollen, bruised face. He saw the high-quality German shepherd protecting him. He saw their complete exhaustion, their clothes stiff with cold, and he looked back in the direction from which they had stumbled. "BLM land back there," Sam observed, his voice neutral. "Nothing for miles. You didn't walk from town." Owen shook his head, a tiny, painful movement. Sam nodded, as if this confirmed something he already suspected. He unhooked a metal canteen from his saddle. He knelt by Owen, his joints popping, and uncapped it. "This is going to hurt," he said. He poured a small amount of water onto Owen's cracked lips. It was agony, a cold fire, but it was life. He swallowed. "Now the dog," Sam said. He poured water into his cupped, gloved hand. Max, sensing no threat, lapped at it eagerly. Sam looked at Owen again, his gaze lingering on the dark bruise on his cheek. "Looks like you had help getting lost." Owen just closed his eyes. "Well," Sam said, standing up, "you can't stay here. The ranch house is about a mile that way. You think you can walk?" Owen looked at his legs. He did not think he could. Sam sighed, a pragmatic sound. "Right." He looked at Max. "You, dog, you look like you've still got something in you." He walked back to his horse, grabbed a coiled rope from the saddle, and returned. He handed one end of the thick, soft rope to Owen. "Hold this." "You," he said to Max, "get him up." Sam looped the rope around his own shoulder, creating a harness, and placed himself on Owen's other side. Max seemed to understand. The dog pushed his strong body under Owen's arm. Between the man and the dog, Owen was hauled to his feet. He cried out, his legs buckling, but they held him. "One step at a time, son," Sam said, his voice quiet but firm. "Let's get you home." The mile-long walk to the ranch house was a blur of exhaustion and pain. Owen leaned heavily on Sam, with Max supporting his other side. They moved in a slow, grim procession. Owen registered very little, only the solid presence of the man and the dog and the crunch of his own boots on the dry earth. The ranch house was not large, but it was solid, a single-story structure built of thick timber and river stone, with a wide porch that offered shade from the morning sun. It looked like it had been there for 100 years, a part of the landscape itself. Sam did not ask questions. His perceptive, quiet nature meant he observed rather than interrogated. He saw the state Owen was in and acted. "Inside," he said, guiding Owen through the door. The interior was clean, sparse, and warm. A large cast-iron wood stove dominated one wall, even though it was not lit. Sam settled Owen into a sturdy wooden chair at the kitchen table. "Stay," Sam said, a simple command.
He returned a moment later with a clean cloth and a basin of water. He wordlessly began to clean the dried blood from the cut on Owen's cheek. Owen flinched, but Sam's touch was steady and impersonal, like a mechanic fixing a machine. "It's just a bruise," Sam diagnosed, his voice a low rumble. "You'll live." He then retrieved a blue enamel mug, filled it with water from the tap, and set it in front of Owen. "Drink." Owen drank, the water tasting cleaner and colder than any he had ever had. He drained the mug. Sam refilled it. Only then did Sam acknowledge the dog. Max was sitting by Owen's chair, his gray and white body stiff with exhaustion, but his eyes were alert, watching Sam. Sam looked at Max for a long moment, a look of professional assessment. "He's a good dog. Did well by you." Sam went to the back room and returned with a heavy metal bowl, which he filled with water. He placed it on the floor. Max looked at Owen, who nodded. The dog drank deeply, his tags clinking against the metal. "There's stew on the stove," Sam said. "Eat, then you sleep." He served Owen a thick, hot beef stew. It was simple, unseasoned, but it was the best food Owen had ever tasted. He ate until the bowl was empty. The warmth spread through his chest, pushing back the deep, cellular cold from the night. "There's a cot in the back room," Sam said, taking the bowl. "It's warm. The dog can stay with you." Owen did not need to be told twice. He stumbled to the small room, barely noting the simple furniture. He collapsed onto the cot, his boots still on, and was asleep before he could even process what had happened. Max, after a final survey of the room, curled up on the floor at the foot of the cot, and he too slept. Owen woke hours later. The sun was high and hot, streaming through the small window. For a moment, he did not know where he was. The scent of sage and horse feed filled the air. Then, the memory of the night, the rifle, the herd, the canyon, Rick's face crashed back in. He sat up too quickly, his head spinning. Max was instantly on his feet, whining softly. "I'm okay, boy. I'm okay." He found Sam on the front porch, sitting in a rocking chair, oiling a piece of leather tack. He did not seem surprised to see Owen. "Slept well," Sam observed. It was not a question. "Yes, thank you," Owen said, his voice rough. He stood awkwardly by the door. I don't know what to do. My truck." "Your truck is gone," Sam said, not looking up from his work. "Town is a 30-mile walk. You've got no water and no gear. You're not a man with a lot of options." "I can work," Owen said, the words coming out stronger than he expected. "I can pay you back for the food. I'm a hard worker." Sam finally stopped. He looked at Owen, his clear blue eyes seeming to see right through the excuses and the pain, down to the bedrock. He saw the tension in Owen's shoulders, the way he held himself, like a man waiting for the next blow. "I'm Sam," he said, formally introducing himself. "This is my ranch. I rescue horses, the ones the BLM rounds up, the ones nobody else wants. It's too much work for one man." He pointed to a small, neat cabin set about 100 yards from the main house. It was little more than a shed, but it was sturdy. "There's a cabin. Got a cot, a stove, and a water pump. It's dry. I provide the food from the house, you provide the labor. We square?"
Owen felt a profound wave of relief so strong his knees almost buckled. There were no questions about his past, no judgment, no expectations other than work. "Yes," Owen said. "We're square." "Good," Sam nodded. "Sun's high. We're burning daylight." Thus a new chapter of Owen's life began. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm that was as punishing as it was healing. The summary Sam had given was an understatement.
The ranch was not just too much work for one man, it was too much work for three. Owen's first task was fencing. He learned that the Nevada sun was an adversary. He learned that the ground was as hard as iron. He spent his days digging post holes, his hands blistering, then callousing, then turning to leather. He hauled heavy rolls of barbed wire, stretching them until his shoulders screamed. He swung a heavy post driver, the repetitive percussive impact shaking his bones. At first, the sound reminded him of things he wanted to forget: the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades, the distant percussion of artillery. He would find himself freezing, his breath caught in his chest. But Max was always there. The dog sat in the shade of the truck watching. When Owen's breathing hitched, Max would get up, walk over, and lean his heavy body against Owen's leg. The simple, solid pressure was an anchor. Unlike the chaotic, deceitful work at Rick's site, this labor was honest. The purpose was clear. If the fence was weak, the horses could get out, hurt themselves, or be lost. If the fence was strong, they were safe. Every post he set was a tangible accomplishment. He worked from sunup to sundown. He ate with Sam in the quiet kitchen, the two men often spending an entire meal in silence, broken only by Sam saying, "More stew." Then a new delivery arrived. A long trailer pulled in, sent from a BLM holding pen. Sam signed the paperwork. "Got 5 new ones," he told Owen. "Mares, from the high country. They're terrified." When the trailer gate opened, the horses exploded out into the receiving corral. They were thin, wild-eyed, their coats matted with burrs. They ran as a single panicked entity circling the small pen, crashing against the wooden rails, looking for an escape that was not there. "We need to move them to the north pasture," Sam said. "Give them room." "But they're too spooked. They'll run right through a new gate." Sam had an old border collie, a black and white dog named Flit, who tried to help. But Flit was a cattle dog. He nipped at their heels. The action, meant to drive cattle, only terrified the wild horses more. One of the mares spun and kicked, narrowly missing the dog. "Flit! Back!" Sam yelled. "He's making it worse!" The horses were now pressed into a corner, trembling, their heads high, ready to bolt. Owen looked at Max. The dog was watching the horses, his body alert, but not aggressive. He was not focused on their heels. He was watching the lead mare. "Max," Owen said quietly. The dog looked at him. "Easy. Go around. Bring them in." Max slipped under the bottom rail of the fence. He did not bark. He did not run. He lowered his head slightly, a gesture of respect, and began a long, slow, deliberate arc, using the fence as a wall. His gray and white coat made him look like a desert wolf, and the horse's ancient instincts recognized him. He was not a predator, but he was a presence. He moved without sound, applying a gentle, constant pressure. When the lead mare tried to break right, Max was suddenly there, not snarling, just standing. The mare snorted and turned. He cut off their only escape route, the one they had come from. He left only one option, the open gate to the large pasture 50 yards away. He did not chase them. He guided them. He walked behind them, a silent, thoughtful shepherd. The lead mare, accepting his guidance, finally walked through the gate. The other 4 followed her without hesitation. Max stood at the gate watching them go,
until Owen said, "Max?" "Here." The dog trotted back, his tail giving a low, satisfied wag. Owen and Sam stood by the fence, watching the horses explore their new pasture. Sam was quiet for a long time.
"I'll be," he finally said, pulling off his hat and wiping his forehead. "I have had cattle dogs my whole life. Never seen one do that. He's not chasing them. He's thinking." Owen just scrubbed Max's head. "He's a good boy." That night, Owen sat on the small porch of his cabin. His hands ached, his back was stiff, the bruise on his face had faded to a pale yellow. He watched the new mares grazing peacefully under the vast, starry sky. He realized he had not thought about Rick or the money or the canyon all day. He had only thought about the posts, the wire, and the horses. Max was asleep at his feet, his paws twitching in a dream. For the first time since he had left the service, Owen felt a quiet that was not empty. It was not the absence of sound. It was the presence of peace. He went inside, lay down on the cot, and was asleep in minutes. There were no nightmares, just the deep, heavy, dreamless sleep of a man who had earned his rest. The fragile peace of the ranch held for almost a month. The hard physical labor was a balm. Owen's hands, once blistered, were now tough, calloused leather. He had helped Sam repair the entire north fence line, and in the process had learned the rhythms of the land. He woke with the sun. His body ached with honest work, and he slept at night, the deep, dreamless sleep of the truly exhausted. Max was thriving. He had a purpose beyond just watching Owen. He was a working partner. He helped Owen move tools. He kept a respectful watch on the new mares, and he had become Sam's shadow, accompanying the old man on his morning rides, his gray and white form a silent, ghostly presence against the sagebrush. This morning, Owen and Sam were replacing a rotted support beam on the main barn. The work was slow, requiring careful measurement and teamwork. Owen was on the ladder, setting the new beam, while Sam steadied it from below. Max was lying in the rectangular patch of shade cast by the water tower, his head on his paws, watching. The sound came first, a low rumble that did not belong. It was not Sam's old truck or the feed supplier. It was the sound of a heavy-duty engine, tuned and maintained, moving too fast on the gravel access road. Owen paused, his hammer in midair. Max's head lifted, his ears swiveled, and a low, almost inaudible rumble started in his chest. A cloud of dust appeared at the end of the road, and from it emerged a white county sheriff's SUV, followed closely by a dark green pickup with the seal of the Bureau of Land Management on the door. Owen's stomach dropped. His fragile sense of safety evaporated. Authority, uniforms, questions. He climbed down the ladder just as the vehicles parked, the doors opening in unison, crunching on the gravel. Two men emerged. The first was a tall man in a tan sheriff's uniform, a thick belt, heavy with equipment, resting low on his hips. He looked to be in his late 50s, his face weary and lined from too much sun and too many long shifts. This was Sheriff Murphy. He moved with a slow, deliberate pace. The second man was younger, wearing the khaki shirt and green trousers of the BLM. He was fit, with sharp, impatient eyes and a clipboard in his hand. This was Agent Dave. Max had risen to his feet, not moving, but standing at attention by the ladder, his body language shifting from relaxed to wary. Sam stepped forward, wiping his hands on a rag. He nodded to the sheriff, his face impassive. "Sheriff?" "Sam," Sheriff Murphy nodded back. The greeting was polite, but held no warmth. "This is Agent Dave from the BLM," the sheriff said. Agent Dave stepped forward, taking the lead. Mr. Sam, we're following up on a report. About 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, we got a call about gunfire up on the high plateau near the canyon rim. Owen went cold. He focused on a spot on the ground, trying to control his breathing. Sam just looked at the agents. That's BLM land. Not my concern. It becomes our concern, Agent Dave said, his voice sharp. When we find fresh .30-06 shell casings and evidence that a herd of Mustangs was run off. A herd that was scheduled for a roundup. Ranches, Sam said, his voice flat. They're always complaining about the horses. Probably some kids they hired. That's what we thought, Sheriff Murphy chimed in, his voice a slow drawl. But the tracks we found, they were fresh. And they led away from the canyon, but not toward town. They led right toward this valley, right toward your property line. The accusation hung in the dry air. They thought Sam had done it. Sam's eyes narrowed. I don't scare horses, Agent. I save them. If you've got something to charge me with, do it. Otherwise, I've got a beam to set. Agent Dave smiled, a thin, unpleasant expression. He had expected this. His eyes shifted, scanning the property, and then they landed on Owen. And who's this? Agent Dave asked, his sharp eyes taking in Owen's military bearing, his short hair, his worn jeans. You've got new help. Sheriff Murphy's gaze also settled on Owen. It was a new piece of the puzzle, and he did not like new pieces. This is Owen, Sam said, his voice a low warning. He works for me. Owen, Agent Dave repeated, stepping toward him. He looked at his clipboard. No last name? Owen felt the familiar hot prickle of panic. He was being cornered. He could feel the man's eyes inspecting him, judging him. It's just Owen. He a veteran? The agent asked Sam, but he never took his eyes off Owen. He's my ranch hand, Sam said. Where were you about 4 weeks ago, Owen? Agent Dave asked, his voice suddenly hard, an interrogator's voice. On the night of, say, the 22nd. Owen's mind went blank. He could not lie. He was not built for it. He could hear the whine in his ears, the sound of Rick's engine, the crack of his own rifle. He could feel the cold of the desert. He stammered, his eyes darting to Sam. That's not an answer, Agent Dave pressed, taking another step closer. He was inside Owen's personal space now. You new in town. You look like you know how to handle a rifle. Did you hear anything that night? Did you see anything? Owen's breath hitched. The world was tilting. The man's face was too close, his questions too sharp. He was trapped. What were you doing? He said, what were you? Agent Dave stopped mid-sentence. He had taken one more aggressive step, raising his hand to point a finger at Owen's chest. But he found his path blocked. Max had moved. He had not run. He had not barked. He had simply materialized, stepping from behind Owen to stand directly in front of him. It was a silent, deliberate, and non-negotiable act. He placed his 90-pound body between Owen and the two officials. He stood like a statue of gray and white muscle, his head held high. He did not look at Owen. He looked directly at Agent Dave. Sheriff Murphy, a man who had seen his share of angry dogs, put his hand lightly on his holster. Sam, get your dog. He's fine, Sam said, his voice calm, though he was watching Max intently. Agent Dave, annoyed, tried to wave the dog away. "Move it, dog! We're talking here!" He made the mistake of trying to push past him. The change in Max was terrifyingly subtle. The fur on his neck did not rise. His teeth remained hidden. But he lifted his head, his dark lips pulling back just enough, and a sound rumbled from deep in his chest. It was not a bark. It was a growl so low and deep it was felt more than heard, a vibration that promised absolute, immediate, and painful consequences. Both men took an involuntary step back. Sheriff Murphy's hand was now firmly on his weapon. "Sam, control your animal, now."
"That's enough, Dave," Sam said, his voice cutting through the tension. He stepped forward, but he spoke to the dog first. "Easy." The growling stopped, but Max did not move. He remained planted in front of Owen, a living shield, his eyes still locked on the agent. "You've said your piece," Sam said to the men, his voice now cold. "And you're upsetting my hand." Owen's a veteran. He doesn't take kindly to being interrogated on his own property. "We're just asking questions," Agent Dave protested, his face red with frustration. "And I'm giving you the answer," Sam said. "You want to know where he was 4 weeks ago? He was right here, working." Owen looked at Sam, his heart pounding. It was not true. "He's been here, what is it now, Owen? Almost a month?" Sam asked, looking at him. Owen, catching the lifeline, just nodded. "He's been working that north fence line from sunup to sundown. Busted his back for me," Sam continued, his voice resonating with absolute authority. "He hasn't left this property since the day he got here. He didn't hear your gunshots, and he didn't run off your horses. He was too busy doing the work you BLM folks should be doing, fixing fences." It was a perfect, unshakable alibi. It was, in its own way, the truth. Owen had arrived the morning after the incident, and he had not left the ranch since. He had no truck, no way to leave. Sheriff Murphy looked at Sam, then at Owen, and finally at the immovable dog still standing guard. The sheriff was a practical man. He knew Sam. He knew the man did not lie. But he also knew he could bend the truth until it broke. This, however, felt solid. "We got no proof he was here, Sam," Agent Dave argued weakly. "And you got no proof he wasn't," Sam countered. "Are we done?" Sheriff Murphy sighed, running a hand over his tired face. This was a dead end. "We're done, for now," he nodded to Sam. "You keep a good eye on him," he said, and it was not clear if he meant Owen or the dog. "I always do," Sam replied. The two men got back in their vehicles, their movements stiff with frustration. They turned around in the wide yard and drove away, leaving another, angrier cloud of dust in their wake. The silence that returned was heavier than before. Owen finally let out a breath he had been holding for 5 minutes. His entire body was shaking. He looked at Sam, who was already turning back toward the barn. You lied for me." Sam paused and looked at him, his gaze unreadable. "I told them what they needed to hear. You were here when I said you were, that's all." He started to walk away. "Sam," Owen called out, his voice hoarse. Sam stopped. "Thank you." Sam just nodded once. "Don't thank me. Thank the dog. He's the one who's a bad liar." Owen looked down at Max, who was now sitting, panting slightly, looking up at him as if nothing had happened. Owen knelt and buried his face in the thick gray fur of his dog's neck. Max was solid, real, and he had not backed down. Owen was safe.
for now. But he knew with a chilling certainty that this was not over. The visit from the sheriff and the BLM agent left a scar on the ranch's quiet. It had been an invasion, a reminder that the world Owen had escaped was still out there, just beyond the newly mended fence line. Sam's lie, or his carefully worded truth, had protected Owen, forging a bond of unspoken alliance. Owen had doubled his efforts, working until his muscles failed, as if his labor alone could build a wall high enough to keep his past at bay. One afternoon, a week after the visit, Sam found Owen finishing repairs on the last of the pasture gates. The work on the fences was, for the most part, done. "You're good with your hands," Sam said, his voice a low rumble. He was leaning against a post, his arms crossed. "I just follow the line," Owen said. "Fences are easy," Sam replied, pushing off the post. "They're just wood and wire." "They don't have an opinion." He nodded toward the far side of the property, where a small, heavily reinforced round pen stood in isolation. "I've got a new job for you." Inside the pen was a horse unlike any Owen had ever seen up close. He was a large stallion, a dark, raw-boned creature whose buckskin coat was a map of old scars, bite marks, and raw patches. He was a recent arrival, a transfer from a holding pen in the north that could not manage him. He was not just wild, he was deeply, furiously traumatized. "He's the alpha of a herd they rounded up," Sam explained, his voice quiet as they stood a safe distance from the rails. "He fought the helicopters. He fought the wranglers. He kicked his way out of 2 different holding pens. They were going to destroy him." The horse thundered back and forth in the pen, his eyes all white and fire. He would charge the fence, striking it with his front hooves with a sound like a sledgehammer hitting a wall. "He needs to learn that a man isn't a predator," Sam said, his gaze fixed on the animal. "He needs to learn that this is a sanctuary, not another prison, and I'm too old to bounce off a fence that hard." He turned his clear blue eyes to Owen. "You're a veteran. You know what it means to fight. Maybe you'll understand him." Owen felt a cold knot of apprehension. This was not a fence. This was a war. "What do you want me to do?" "Just be with him," Sam said. "Show him you're not a threat. We call it gentling. But there's nothing gentle about him." For the next 3 days, Owen failed. His first attempt was a disaster. He entered the round pen with a rope and a long lunge whip, not for striking, but for directing. He was a Marine. He understood hierarchy. He understood the need to establish who was in command. The stallion saw him as a threat to be eliminated. The moment Owen stepped into the dirt, the horse lowered his head and charged. Owen was not a horseman, he was a soldier. He stood his ground, cracking the whip on the ground in front of him. Crack! The sound, sharp and percussive, echoed in the small space. It was a mistake. The stallion did not stop. He veered at the last second, his powerful hind legs lashing out, kicking the fence rails just inches from Owen's head. The thud of the impact was so violent, it shook the ground. Owen's blood ran cold. The enclosed space, the unpredictable violent attacks, the percussive crack and thud. He was not in a round pen in Nevada. He was in a narrow, dusty alley in Fallujah, the air thick with brick dust, the sound of machine gun fire echoing off the concrete. He could feel the panic rising, the cold sweat, the uncontrollable tremor in his hands. He scrambled out of the pen, slamming the gate shut, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Max, who had been watching from the shade of the barn, ran to him whining, pushing his cold nose into Owen's hand. Owen just leaned against the fence, his eyes closed, until his heart stopped trying to escape his chest. He tried again the next day. This time, he would not use the whip. He would just use the rope, try to get it over the horse's neck. He would be quiet, calm. But the horse remembered. The moment Owen entered, the rage was there. The stallion charged, not at Owen, but at the fence, circling him, kicking, snorting, turning the pen into a vortex of dust and aggression. Owen felt the walls closing in. He felt the rising panic. He was trapped. He was being flanked. He was exposed. He yelled, a rough, hoarse sound, and waved the rope. The horse reared, his massive body blotting out the sun, his teeth bared. Owen fled again. He was failing. He was failing the horse, and he was failing Sam. The confrontation was not healing him. It was unraveling him. On the fourth day, he stood outside the pen. He could not even bring himself to open the gate. He was tired, humiliated, and scared. "I can't," he said, his voice quiet. Sam was nearby, replacing a hinge on the barn door, pretending not to watch. "I can't do it, Sam. He's too broken. Or I am." He looked at his hands, which were shaking. "Every time I go in there, I'm back. I'm back there. You need to use force. You need to tie him down. You need to break him." Sam stopped his work. He walked over, his boots slow in the dust. He looked at the horse, who was now standing in the center of the pen, his sides heaving, watching them with hateful eyes. "What has force ever gotten you, Owen?" Sam asked, his voice soft. "It got you out of the war, but did it get the war out of you?" Owen had no answer. He slid down the fence, his back to the rails, and put his head in his hands. He was about to give up. Max had been sitting by Owen's feet the entire time, his body vibrating with his owner's distress. He had watched the man fail. He had watched the horse rage. Now he acted. He nudged Owen's arm. Owen, defeated, just shook his head. "Not now, boy." So Max made his own decision. He stood up, walked to the fence, and with the same fluid grace he had used in the pasture, he slipped under the lowest rail and into the round pen. "Max!" "No!" Owen screamed, scrambling to his feet. "Get out of there! He'll kill you!" The stallion's head snapped around. He saw the dog, his ears flattened, his body tensed for a charge at this new, smaller, four-legged threat. But Max did not do what the stallion expected. The dog did not bark. He did not growl. He did not show his teeth. He did not even look at the horse. Max avoided direct eye contact. He turned his head slightly, presenting his side. He lowered his gray and white head, a clear gesture of respect. He stood still for a long moment, communicating in a language older than words. "I am not a threat. I am not here to challenge you. I respect your space." The stallion, who was braced for an attack, was completely bewildered. He snorted, a sharp puff of air, but the aggression in his stance faltered. He pawed the ground, confused. Max then took a few slow, casual steps, not toward the horse, but in a wide, respectful arc, sniffing the ground as if he were just passing by. Then, about 20 feet from the stallion, he lay down, his back to the horse, and let out a long, audible yawn, a profound gesture of appeasement. Owen stood at the fence, his heart in his throat, utterly transfixed. He was watching a miracle. Max was not fighting, he was surrendering. He was not trying to win, he was offering peace. The stallion watched the dog. His head, which had been high and rigid, lowered an inch. His breathing, which had been ragged, deepened. The dog was not a threat. The dog was calm. The stallion's own taut muscles began to relax, and Owen understood. He looked at his own clenched fists. He looked at the rope he had dropped. He had been walking into that pen like a soldier, his shoulders back, his eyes hard, his jaw set. He had been radiating threats, challenging the horse, bringing his own war into that small circle. He had been trying to break a creature that was already broken. Max was treating the horse not as an enemy, but as a fellow creature who was terrified. "What has force ever gotten you?" Sam's words echoed in his head. Nothing. It had gotten him nothing. Slowly, his body shaking for a different reason now, Owen called his dog. "Maxim." "Here." Max stood, shook his fur, and without a backward glance at the horse, slipped back out of the pen. Owen took a deep breath. He let it out. He unlatched the gate. This time he left the rope. He left the whip. He left his anger and his fear outside the rails. He stepped into the pen. The stallion tensed. The old reflex returning. Owen did exactly what Max had done. He kept his head down. He avoided eye contact. He turned his shoulder to the horse, making himself smaller, less of a threat. He did not walk toward the horse. He walked along the fence line, his pace slow and steady. He just existed. The horse watched him, confused by this new behavior. This man who had been a predator for 3 days was suddenly acting like the dog. Owen circled the pen twice. Then, in the center, he sat down in the dirt, his back to the stallion. It was the most terrifying, liberating thing he had ever done. He was completely vulnerable. He was offering total trust. He sat. He listened to the wind. He listened to his own breathing. And he heard the footsteps. Soft. Thud, thud, thud. Not the sound of an attack, but of cautious curiosity. He felt a presence behind him, a shadow blocking the sun. He felt the hot, moist air of the horse's breath on the back of his neck. A large, velvety nose touched his hair. Owen's heart hammered, but he did not move. He let the horse investigate. The stallion nudged his shoulder, a gentle, questioning push. Slowly, so slowly, Owen turned his head. He did not look the horse in the eye. He looked at the horse's muzzle. He lifted his hand, palm up, and held it out. The stallion snorted, a soft, warm puff of air, and for a fleeting second, he pressed his nose into the center of Owen's palm. It was a truce. Outside the fence, Max let out a short, happy bark. Owen looked over. Sam was standing by the barn, watching. The old man nodded once, then turned and went back to his work. The lesson was over. The truce in the round pen had changed everything. It had changed the horse, who no longer met Owen with rage, but with a cautious, growing curiosity. But more than that, it had changed Owen. The lesson Max had taught him, that vulnerability was not weakness, that surrender was a form to strength, had settled deep in his bones. The constant vibrating tension that had lived in his shoulders for 8 years had finally begun to unwind. He was grooming the alpha stallion, an animal he had not been able to get within 20 feet of, and who he now simply called Buck, when the sound of a struggling engine interrupted the quiet. Buck's head snapped up, his ears flattening. Owen put a calming hand on the horse's neck. "Easy, boy. It's okay." Max, who had been dozing in a patch of sun, was on his feet in an instant, his body rigid. He let out a low, soft whine and looked at Owen, his eyes full of apprehension. A battered, dust-covered sedan, its muffler rattling, was pulling up the ranch road. It was a car Owen recognized with a sinking heart. It was his mother's. The car stopped, and Maria got out before the engine had even fully died. She looked nothing like the tired, apathetic woman he had left behind weeks ago. This was a new person, a creature of pure, frantic desperation. Her hair was matted, her eyes were wild, and she was visibly trembling. She did not see Sam, who was in the main barn, watching. She only saw Owen. "Owen! Thank God!" she cried, half running, stumbling over the uneven ground. "Owen, you have to help me." Max moved to stand at Owen's side, his body blocking the path, though he did not growl. "What is it, Mom?" Owen asked, his voice calm. He did not move, his hand still resting on Buck's neck, anchoring both himself and the horse. "It's Rick. He's gone," she sobbed, the words tumbling out. "He never came home." Not after that night. And then, men came. She was wringing her hands, her gaze darting around, as if the men might be there, hiding in the shadows of the barn. "What men, Mom?" "Horrible men, Owen. They said he owed them money. Thousands, from gambling. They said if he didn't pay, they'd find him. And if they couldn't find him, they'd find me." She was breathing in short, panicked gasps. She clutched at her house dress. "They tore up the living room. They took the television. They said they'd be back. I'm so scared." Owen looked at her, his face impassive. He felt a deep, familiar weariness. It was the same story, just a different chapter. Maria saw his stillness, and her panic shifted to a sharp, focused plea. She knew why she was here. "You have to help him," she insisted, her voice becoming a desperate whine. "You get that check from the government for your service, the disability. You get it every month, don't you? You must have money saved. You have to give it to me. It's the only way." Owen looked at his mother. He saw the genuine terror in her eyes. But beneath it, he saw the same old corrosive pattern. He was the solution. He was the fix. "No, Mom," he said, his voice quiet but perfectly steady. Maria froze, as if he had struck her. What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. I won't give you the money." "But it's for Rick. It's for your brother," she shrieked, the desperation turning to rage. "He'll be killed." "Don't you understand what I'm telling you?" "I understand," Owen said, and for the first time he was not angry. He was just clear. "And the answer is no." "How can you be so cruel?" she cried, tears of genuine frustration streaming down her face. "He's your family. He's not strong like you. He never was." And there it was, the line she had used his entire life. "You're the strong one, Owen," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "You're the Marine. You're tough. You can handle things. He's weak. He makes mistakes. He can't help it. The strong have to take care of the weak. You have to carry him. It's your duty." Owen looked at her, and the final piece of his old life clicked shut. He finally saw the trap that had held him for 30 years. He was not the strong one. He was the designated one. He was the pack mule, expected to carry his brother's burdens,
and his mother's, until his own back broke. "No," he said again, and this time his voice held a profound finality. "That's not strength, Mom. That's a sickness, and I'm not part of it anymore." He took his hand from Buck's neck and took a step forward, Max moving with him like a shadow. "It's not about the money," he said, his voice low. "It's about this. This role, the one you just said. You taught him that he was weak, so he never had to be strong. And you taught me that I had to be strong, so I was never allowed to be weak." He thought of the nights in his room, drowning in panic, with only Max to pull him out. He thought of his failure in the round pen. "I won't do it. I won't be the family's sacrifice. Every time he falls, you ask me to break my own body to cushion his landing. I'm done." Maria stared at him. She was looking at a stranger. The broken, quiet boy who had come home was gone. In his place was a man made of calm, unyielding iron. Her desperation soured into a final, venomous spite. "You're just like him," she whispered. "He'll be killed." "They'll find him, and it will be your fault. His blood will be on your hands." Owen just shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I can't, and I won't." She held his gaze for a long, trembling moment, then her face crumpled. She turned, stumbled back to her car, and drove away, the rattling of her engine a final, pathetic retreat. Owen stood for a long time, watching the dust settle. He felt empty. Not bad, not good, just empty. And quiet. He felt a wet nose press into his hand. He looked down at Max, who was watching him with worried eyes. Owen let out a breath he had been holding for 20 years and leaned down, burying his face in his dog's neck. "It's okay, boy," he whispered. "It's finally okay." From the barn, Sam watched the car disappear. He said nothing. That evening, the air was cool and clear. Owen sat on the small porch of his cabin, cleaning a piece of horse tack. Max was asleep at his feet, his paws twitching. The confrontation with his mother replayed in his mind. He felt a sting of guilt, but beneath it, a powerful, solid sense of rightness. He heard the crunch of boots on gravel. Sam was walking over, holding 2 heavy mugs. He handed one to Owen. It was strong, black coffee. Sam sat on the other step, his movements stiff in the cool air. They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the horses shifting in the nearby pasture. "That was a hard thing you did today," Sam said finally, his gaze on the horizon. "I don't know," Owen said. "It felt necessary." "They're usually the same thing," Sam said. He took a sip of his coffee. "You remind me of my boy." Owen looked at him, surprised. Sam rarely spoke of himself. "His name was Justin," Sam said, his voice a low, rough murmur, the words heavy with memory. "He's the reason for all this." He pointed with his mug to a picture frame visible through his own kitchen window in the main house. "That's him, my son. Joined the Army right out of high school. Said he wanted to see the world. He went to Afghanistan, came back in 2011. Sam's face hardened, the lines around his eyes deepening. He came back, but he didn't really come home. He looked fine, but he was hollow. He had the nightmares. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't be around people. What you call PTSD. We just called it shell-shocked." Owen stopped polishing the leather, his heart growing heavy. He knew this story. "I tried to fix him," Sam said, his voice thick with a regret so old it was part of his bones. "I was a fool. I told him to man up. I told him to get a job, to get over it. I was like you when you first met Buck. I used force. I tried to break him of his sadness, like it was a bad horse." He stared into his mug. "He was in a bad way. And I just kept pushing. One morning I came out to the barn to feed the horses, and he was gone. He'd taken his own life. Right in that stall, the one Buck is in now." Owen closed his eyes. "I started this place," Sam whispered, "to save these broken horses, these alphas, these lost causes. I did it because I couldn't save him. This ranch is just my penance." He turned and looked at Owen, his blue eyes clear and sharp in the twilight. "I watched you today. I saw what you said to your mother. And I watched you for weeks with that stallion. You learned something I never did, Justin's father. You learned how to stop fighting. You learned how to be gentle with something broken. And that includes yourself." Sam set his mug down on the porch step. "You won your war, Owen. The real one. The one that follows you home." He looked at Owen, man to man. "This place, it's too much for me. I'm an old man. These horses, this land, they need someone who understands them. They need a man like you." Owen was speechless. He did not understand. "I want you to stay," Sam said, his voice firm. "Not as a hired hand. I want to offer you a partnership. And when I'm gone, this place, this ranch, all of it, it's yours. Yours and Max's, if you'll have it." Owen stared at the old man, at the silhouettes of the horses grazing in the moonlight, at the loyal dog resting at his feet. He had come here with nothing, a broken man running from his past. And now, this man who had also lost a son to the war was offering him everything. A home, a future, a legacy. Owen started, his throat tight with an emotion he could not name. "Sam, Don't answer now," Sam said, standing up. "Think on it. The work is hard. The pay is terrible. But it's a good life." He picked up his mug and walked back to his house, leaving Owen on the porch with Max, under a vast, silent, and hopeful sky. Sam's offer hung in the cool, clear air long after the old man had returned to his house. Owen sat on the porch of his cabin, the heavy coffee mug cold in his hands. A partnership, a legacy, a home. He looked out at the vast, silent landscape, the silhouettes of the grazing horses' dark shapes against a sea of starlight. For the first time in his life, the emptiness did not feel threatening. It felt like a promise. It felt like peace. He had not given Sam an answer, but he knew what it would be. He felt the tension, the coiling spring of vigilance that had lived in his muscles for 8 years, finally unspool. He was tired, but it was the good, honest ache of labor, not the corrosive exhaustion of the war. Max, sensing the profound calm in his owner, was sprawled across the wooden porch steps, his gray and white body limp in a deep, trusting sleep. His paws twitched, chasing rabbits in a dream, his breathing a soft, rhythmic huff. Owen finally stood, stretching his sore muscles. He rinsed the mug in his small sink and lay down on his cot, his boots by the door. He was asleep in minutes, falling into a deeper, more peaceful sleep than he had known since before 2011. The ranch was dark.
The moon was a sliver, offering no light. The only sound was the distant, high-pitched yip of a coyote, miles away. And then, another sound. It was not a natural sound. It was not the wind, or the horses, or the creak of the old house. It was the faint, sharp scrape of metal on metal, coming from the main barn. On the porch, Max went from a limp sleep to a rigid, quivering statue in less than a second. His head snapped up, his ears locked forward, his entire body trembling with adrenaline. He did not growl. He listened, his head cocked, his black nose testing the air. He smelled the familiar, comforting sense of hay, horse, and old leather. But underneath it, faint and sharp, was a smell that did not belong. The sour, panicked sweat of a stranger. An intruder. The sound came again, louder this time. The metallic click of a latch being forced, followed by the low, muffled groan of the heavy stall door, Justin's stall, where Buck was kept, being slid open. That was enough. Max launched himself from the porch, not toward the barn, but at the cabin door. He hit the thin wood with his full 90-pound weight, a solid, desperate thud. Inside, Owen was pulled from the deepest sleep of his life, not slowly, but all at once. As a Marine, he had been trained to wake from a dead sleep to full, heart-pounding combat readiness. This was not Max's "I need to go out" bark. This was not his "there is a raccoon" bark. This was a sound Owen had only heard once before, in the back of Rick's truck, just before the gunfire. It was an explosion of sound, a frantic, high-pitched, desperate alarm. Max was clawing at the door, the sound of his nails splitting the wood. Owen was out of the cot before his eyes were fully open. "Max!" "What is it?" He ripped the door open. Max did not pause to be acknowledged. He shot past Owen's legs, a gray and white blur, and bolted straight toward the main barn. The chaos had been so loud, so violent, that a light flicked on in the main house. Sam. The sound had woken him too. "Max!" "Heel," Owen commanded, but the dog ignored him, his duty clear. Owen grabbed the heavy metal flashlight by his cot. He did not bother with his boots. He shoved his bare feet into them, unlaced. He ran out onto the porch, his heart hammering, and saw the beam of Sam's own flashlight cutting through the darkness from the main house. The two beams converged on the barn, and that is when Owen heard it. A man's voice, a panicked whisper. "Shut up! Shut up, you stupid animal!" Followed by the terrified, high-pitched scream of a horse and the solid crack of hooves striking wood. "He's in the barn!" Sam yelled, his voice rough with sleep and sudden fear. "He's in Buck's stall!" Owen ran, his flashlight beam bouncing, illuminating the path. Max was already at the barn, barking furiously, not entering, but guarding the only exit, a shadow of rage dancing in the dust. Owen and Sam reached the wide barn door at the same time. "Owen, wait!" Sam cautioned. But Owen just raised his flashlight. He stepped inside, sweeping the powerful beam into the dark hay-scented interior. The light found the stall, Justin's stall. The door was wide open. Inside, Buck was a nightmare of panic. The huge stallion was rearing, his eyes white, his front hooves striking the walls, sawdust flying. He was terrified, and fighting him, yanking on a rope halter he had managed to slip over the horse's head, was a man. He was thin, skeletal, his clothes hanging off him. His face was covered in a several-day-old beard, his eyes wide and hollow. He was shaking, a strange, sobbing sound catching in his throat as he fruitlessly pulled on the rope. He froze like an animal caught in the headlights, his face pale and grotesque in the twin beams of light. It was Rick. He was not the sneering, arrogant bully from the construction site. He was not the cold, calculating man from the canyon. This was a cornered animal. This was the desperate, strung-out man his mother had described. He was a ghost, and he had brought the war back to Owen's sanctuary. "Rick," Owen said. His voice was not a yell. It was cold, dead, and final. Rick let go of the rope. He stumbled back against the stall wall, his hands raised, shielding his eyes from the light. Buck, free of the pressure, reared one last time and then scrambled to the back of his stall, his sides heaving. "Owen," Rick panted, his voice a dry croak. "Owen, thank God. You gotta help me. I didn't—" "Get out of the stall," Sam said. His voice was low, and it held a dangerous, cold anger that Owen had never heard before. This was not just trespassing. This was a violation of something sacred. "Sam, I just needed the horse," Rick stammered, his eyes darting between Owen and the old man. "I can pay you back. I just needed one thing to get me clear." "They're going to kill me, Owen." "You came here to steal from him," Owen said, taking a step forward. Max was at his side now, the fur on his back ridged, a growl rumbling in his chest, his eyes locked on Rick. "I had no choice," Rick shrieked, his voice breaking. "He owes me. He's my brother. He sat on all that money. Mom told me. He let me. Rick's desperation finally broke. He looked at the horse, then at Owen, and he saw that there was no escape. The path was blocked by his brother, by the old man, and by the gray, growling wolf that had ruined everything. He made a sudden, frantic dash for the open stall door. "Get out of my way!" He tried to shove past Owen. He never made it. Max, who had been waiting for this, moved like a spring. He did not bite. He hit Rick in the center of his chest with his shoulders and head, a solid 90-pound impact that knocked the air from Rick's lungs and sent him sprawling backward into the dusty aisle. Rick landed hard, the wind knocked out of him, gasping like a fish. Max stood over him, his teeth bared now, his growl echoing in the barn. He would not let him move. Owen looked down at his brother, who was defeated, pathetic, and crying in the dirt. He felt nothing. No pity, no anger. Just a vast, cold emptiness. Sam stepped past him, a coil of rope in his hand from a nearby post. "The sheriff has been wanting to meet the man who left those shells up on the rim." Owen just stood there, the beam of his flashlight holding his brother in place. He looked at Max, who was still standing guard, a silent, loyal, and perfect soldier. "Good boy," Owen whispered. "Good boy." The night of retaliation was over. The beams of the two flashlights cut the darkness into sharp, terrified pieces. Rick, gasping in the dirt. Max, a statue of controlled fury, standing over him. And Buck, the stallion, his eyes white as he stomped nervously in the violated stall. Owen was no longer shaking. The panic, the confusion, the ghosts that lived in the corners of his mind, they were all silent. He was not a victim. He was not a soldier. He was a man defending his home. "Sam," Owen said, his voice a low, steady command that cut through Rick's desperate sobs. "Call Sheriff Murphy. Tell him we have a horse thief." Sam, who had been frozen in a state of cold rage, looked at Owen. He saw the new authority in the younger man's eyes, the absolute absence of fear. He nodded once, a look of profound, paternal approval. "Watch him." Sam turned and walked quickly, his boots crunching on the gravel, back to the main house. Owen was alone in the barn aisle with his brother and his dog. "Owen, Owen, please," Rick whimpered from the ground. He tried to push himself up onto his elbows. The growl from Max deepened, a vibration that seemed to shake the very dust at Rick's feet. He froze, his eyes wide with terror. "Don't move, Rick," Owen said, his voice flat. He kept the beam of the flashlight steady on his brother's face. "You can't do this," Rick pleaded, the tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on his cheeks. "I'm your brother. I'm family. You can't let them take me. Owen, please." Owen thought of the canyon. He thought of the freezing night, the terror, the moment he had collapsed, ready to die. He thought of Max, his one true ally. "You stopped being my brother when you left me in that canyon," Owen said, his voice holding no heat, only the cold, hard finality of a closing door. "You came here. You threatened my home. You threatened my family." He glanced at Sam's house, then back to Rick. "This is my family now." Rick just stared at him, the reality of his situation finally dawning. He had no more cards to play. He stopped crying and just lay there, a broken, empty man in the dirt. They waited. The only sounds were the shuddering breaths from Rick, the nervous stomping of Buck in his stall, and the low, steady growl from Max, a promise he would not break. The distant wail of a siren grew from a whine to a roar. Red and blue lights flashed across the barn wall, painting the scene in a grotesque, pulsing light. The sheriff's SUV crunched to a stop in the yard. Sheriff Murphy got out, his face grim. Sam was right behind him, pointing to the barn. Murphy entered, his hand on his holster, taking in the scene in an instant. Rick on the ground, Owen standing like a guard, and the dog, a silent, gray wolf, holding the prisoner. "Rick," Murphy said, his voice heavy with resignation. He had known this was coming. "You're a hard man to find." "He was in the stall, Sheriff," Owen said, moving his flashlight beam to the broken latch and the rope halter Rick had dropped. "Trying to take the stallion." Rick, seeing the law, made one last pathetic attempt. "He's lying. It's a mistake. Owen, tell him. Tell him we were just talking." Owen looked at Sheriff Murphy. "He was caught in the act. He's been trespassing." Murphy nodded. He had all the evidence he needed. The attempted theft, the desperation Maria had reported, the shell casings in the canyon, it all clicked into place. "Rick, get on your feet. Slowly. Hands behind your back." Owen gave a quiet command. "Maximum. Easy. Heel." Like a switch being thrown, the growling stopped. Max took 2 silent steps back, his body language shifting from aggressor to guardian, and sat at Owen's left side, his eyes still locked on Rick. Murphy pulled Rick to his feet, cuffed his hands behind his back, and began to read him his rights. Rick did not resist. He was empty, his eyes hollow. As Murphy led Rick out of the barn, he paused and looked at Owen. "Sam told me what you've been doing here. Good work, son." He then glanced at Max. "And you? You should teach that dog to lie like Sam said. He's too honest." Owen said nothing. He and Sam followed the sheriff out into the yard. The cool night air felt clean. They watched as Murphy put Rick into the back of the SUV. The door slammed shut, a sound of absolute finality. The engine started. The red taillights flared as the SUV turned, and then it began its slow drive down the long gravel road, taking Owen's old life with it. Owen stood and watched until the lights were just tiny red specks, until they finally disappeared over the dark horizon. He was free. He expected to feel triumph.
He expected to feel relief. He expected to feel something. Instead, he just felt a profound, heavy, and complex sadness. He was mourning.
Not for Rick, the man who had just been arrested, but for the idea of a brother he had always wanted and never had. He was mourning the death of his own toxic hope that his family could ever be fixed. He felt the familiar old tremor start in his hand. The ground felt unsteady. The world, which had been so sharp and clear moments before, was tilting again. And then he felt it. A cold, wet nose pushing insistently into his trembling palm. He looked down. Max was staring up at him, not with the high-strung energy of the confrontation, but with a deep, quiet, knowing gaze. It was a silent, steadying pressure. "I am here. You are not alone." Owen let out a breath he had not known he was holding. He dropped his hand and buried his fingers deep in the thick gray fur of Max's neck. He anchored himself to the solid, living, loyal creature at his side. The trembling stopped. Sam stepped up beside him. He did not say a word. He just clapped his hand once on Owen's shoulder, a firm, warm pressure that said everything that needed to be said. Several months passed. The brutal heat of the Nevada summer had bled into the sharp, clear gold of autumn. The ranch was no longer just surviving. It was thriving. The fences were straight as arrows. The barn, its stall mended, had a fresh coat of deep red paint. Owen stood by the round pen. He wore the same plaid shirt, but it was worn with the easy confidence of a man who knew exactly where he belonged. He was leaner, his face weathered, but the haunted look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, quiet calm. He was talking, his voice steady and low, to a small group of men and women who stood listening. They were all in their 20s and 30s, and they all had the same guarded, watchful, and haunted look that Owen had worn when he first arrived. "The first rule here," Owen was saying, "is that we don't use force. These horses," he gestured to the pasture, where Buck, the alpha stallion, was grazing peacefully, his coat shining. "They're not broken. They're just like us. They've seen things, and they're just trying to find a way to feel safe again." He smiled, a small, genuine expression. "We're going to show them how, and in the process, they're going to show us." On the porch of the main house, Sam sat in his rocking chair, watching, a rare, soft smile on his face. He was the proprietor, but Owen was the manager. Owen was the heart of the new program. And a few feet away, sitting in a patch of morning sun, was Max. He was not at Owen's side. He did not need to be. He was the ranch's silent guardian, his gray and white coat thick in the cool air, his ears relaxed. He watched the new veterans, his tail giving a slow, lazy thump on the dry ground. The session ended, and the new arrivals moved toward the barn to meet the horses. Owen watched them go. He turned, and Max was instantly on his feet, falling into that familiar, easy heel position. They walked together, man and dog, side by side, toward the house. Owen stopped and looked out over the valley, this new, vast, and quiet life he had built, or perhaps had been led to. He was not a refugee. He was not a soldier. He was home. It often takes a creature with no words to teach us the most important lessons. That true loyalty is a shelter, and that healing begins the moment we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Owen and Max found their new dawn by saving each other. If their journey resonated with your heart, the kindest way to show your support is by sharing this story or by leaving a comment below.
We invite you to continue the journey with another one of our tales by clicking the video that has just appeared on your screen. And we hope you will join our growing family by subscribing.